Rules don't apply to me, and clearly, they don't scare you either.
Power is not declared in volume, young lady. It is shown in how you treat others.
The courtroom is already tense when it happens. Voices overlap, impatience hangs in the air. And then she leans forward, eyes sharp, tone cutting through the room like a blade. You're powerless. The words land hard, louder than intended, louder than necessary. For a split second, everything stops. A quiet gasp moves through the gallery. Someone shifts, uncomfortably. This is the moment everyone will remember. Across the bench, Judge Frank Caprio does not flinch. He doesn't raise an eyebrow or tighten his jaw. He doesn't interrupt or correct her. He simply looks at her, calm and still, as if the noise hasn't touched him at all. The contrast is striking. Her volume fills the room, but his silence somehow feels heavier. To some, her outburst feels familiar. The confidence without foundation. The certainty that rules bend for those bold enough to challenge them. To others, it's embarrassing. A public display of entitlement colliding with a space built on order and restraint? Either way, the tension is undeniable. This is no longer about a citation or a fine. This has become a test of authority, dignity, and control. His expression never changes. Not anger, not offense, just patience. The kind that suggests he's seen this before and knows exactly where it leads. And in that stillness, the audience senses it too. Something is coming, because what she didn't realize was devastating. The calm man she just challenged had spent a lifetime proving the opposite. This moment doesn't live or die inside a single courtroom. It spreads because it touches something familiar, something millions feel but rarely see resolved. Across screens and comment sections, people recognize the tension instantly. A rule is challenged, not with evidence or reason, but with attitude. Authority is tested, not because it is unjust, but because someone believes confidence alone should override it. That is why clips like this travel so far. It isn't about traffic law or a fine. It's about accountability in an era that often confuses volume for truth. Many watching have stood on one side of that imbalance before. They've waited their turn, followed the rules, swallowed frustration, and wondered why entitlement so often seems rewarded. Seeing it confronted calmly feels validating. It's almost therapeutic. Judge Caprio's courtroom has become a stage for these moments because it offers something rare. There is no cruelty, no humiliation, no shouting match. Instead, there is restraint. For immigrant families, for working people, for anyone who learned early that dignity matters, this restraint resonates deeply. It reflects a belief that justice can be firm without being heartless. Authority can be strong without being loud. Online, these moments spark debates that go far beyond the case itself. Commenters argue, share personal stories, and project their own experiences onto the exchange. Some see their parents in that bench, others see themselves standing there, hoping for fairness. The virality comes from recognition. It reassures viewers that composure still matters, that respect still counts, and that quiet authority has not disappeared. In a loud world, this kind of restraint feels rare, almost radical, and deeply necessary for anyone who still believes in shared rules that hold. Communities together across differences and generations, the courtroom itself becomes a mirror of society. A place where systems are questioned and patience is tested, where some arrive expecting exceptions and others arrive expecting fairness. The clash isn't ideological on the surface, but it carries weight beneath it. Who deserves grace? Who owes responsibility? And who decides? As the tension builds, the audience senses that this exchange is no longer accidental. It is symbolic. A collision between entitlement and accountability, ego and composure, noise and calm. And to understand how this confrontation reached a boiling point, you have to look at the person who believed the rules didn't apply to her. She doesn't see herself as a villain. In her mind, she is assertive, confident, unwilling to be talked down to. She walks into the courtroom carrying that certainty like armor, convinced that if she speaks loudly enough, firmly enough, the ground beneath her will shift. Every eye roll, every interruption, Every dismissive shrug is a signal she believes strength looks like defiance. Her tone sharpens when challenged. She interrupts not to clarify, but to dominate. The rules feel negotiable to her, not because she has studied them, but because she has rarely been told no. Authority to her is something fragile, something that collapses under pressure. If a judge stays calm, she reads it as weakness. If he listens, she assumes he is losing ground. This mindset didn't appear out of nowhere. It is shaped by a culture that often rewards performance over patience, volume over substance. Online, the loudest voice wins attention. In arguments, confidence is mistaken for correctness. She has learned that if you sound sure enough, people back down. And most of the time, they do. What she doesn't recognize is the contradiction playing out in real time. She demands respect while offering none in return. She insists on being heard while refusing to listen. She frames herself as misunderstood, even mistreated, yet resists every invitation to take responsibility. In her version of events, consequences are always unfair, never earned. Emotion drives her responses. Frustration spills into sarcasm. Sarcasm hardens into accusation. Each reaction escalates the moment further, as if control can be seized through intensity alone. She believes power lives in the upper hand, in the final word, in the ability to unsettle the person across from her, but beneath that confidence is a fragile assumption that silence means surrender, that humility signals defeat, that discipline is the absence of strength rather than its foundation. She cannot imagine authority that doesn't announce itself because she has never learned to recognize it. So she pushes. She talks over. She tests boundaries, mistaking patience for permission. The courtroom becomes less a place of judgment and more a stage where she performs certainty, hoping it will be mistaken for legitimacy. And for a brief moment, it almost works. The room tenses. Attention shifts. The air thickens. She measures respect by reaction, not by principle. When people pause, she presses harder. When boundaries hold, she assumes they are temporary. This approach has served her well enough outside rooms like this one, where impatience can intimidate and certainty can confuse. Here, however, every gesture is recorded, every interruption noted. The confidence she relies on begins to echo back at her, hollow and exposed. What she believes is control starts to look like avoidance, a refusal to slow down long enough to face consequence. In pushing forward, she never notices how quickly the room begins pulling away from her. Without saying anything back, but across from her sat a man who had spent decades mastering the kind of power she couldn't recognize. Judge Frank Caprio's. Authority was never built on volume. It was built long before this courtroom, long before cameras and viral clips, in a life shaped by discipline limits, and an understanding of how deeply power can affect ordinary people. He grew up learning that rules mattered, not because they were perfect, but because without them, the most vulnerable paid the highest price. That lesson stayed with him, shaping how he would later wield authority. His path through the legal system was deliberate and steady. No shortcuts, no theatrics, no need to dominate a room to prove control. Early on, he learned that justice loses its meaning when ego enters the equation. Authority, he believed, should never be about winning, embarrassing, or asserting superiority. It should be about restoring balance. Over time, this philosophy set him apart. While others built reputations on toughness, he built one on fairness. Defendants noticed the difference immediately. Even those who lost their cases walked away feeling heard. That wasn't accidental. Caprio listened closely, asked clear questions, and explained his reasoning without condescension. He never raised his voice because he didn't need to. Silence, used properly, carried more weight than shouting ever could. In his courtroom, respect didn't come from fear, but from consistency. Over decades on the bench, he faced every kind of disruption imaginable. Angry defendants, emotional outbursts, open defiance. Each time the pattern repeated. The louder the room became, the calmer he remained. And that calm had an effect. People expected confrontation and instead found patience. They expected punishment and instead encountered accountability delivered with dignity. Chaos didn't overpower him, because he never met it at its level. For immigrant families and working people, this mattered deeply. Many entered the courtroom already tense, shaped by experiences where authority felt unpredictable or hostile. Caprio's steadiness offered something rare: reassurance. His fairness wasn't performative. It didn't depend on who you were, where you came from, or how confidently you spoke. The rules applied evenly, and so did his attention. Stories from his courtroom spread because the results were so consistent. Heated moments dissolved, not through force, but through restraint. Defendants who arrived defensive often left reflective. The lesson was subtle, but powerful. Authority doesn't need to intimidate to be effective. In fact, the strongest authority often feels quiet. This reputation followed him into every case. People came braced for conflict and left with clarity, even when consequences were unavoidable. His approach reinforced trust in institutions many had learned to doubt. It showed that success within the system didn't require cruelty, and that power could be exercised without stripping anyone of dignity. Now, seated across from open defiance, all of that history lived in his silence. Every lesson, every case, every moment of restraint had prepared him for this exact challenge. And now, faced with open defiance, the judge had a choice: assert power loudly, or demonstrate it quietly. The courtroom tightens as she continues. Her words come faster now, layered with impatience, cutting off responses before they can land. She scoffs at procedure, waves away explanation, talks over the bench, as if volume itself might bend the moment in her favor. Each interruption sharpens the air. Each dismissive gesture pushes the tension higher. People in the gallery shift in their seats, sensing the line has already been crossed. She expects resistance. She seems almost to crave it. A raised voice from the judge, a sharp reprimand, some sign that she has succeeded in unsettling him. Instead, she is met with nothing. Judge Caprio listens. He does not interrupt. He does not react. He lets her speak until the words begin to pile up, overlapping and repetitive, losing shape as they echo back into the silence. That silence starts to press in. What first felt like patience now feels deliberate. The room grows uneasy, not because of what is being said, because of what isn't. The judge's calm becomes a mirror, reflecting the imbalance of the exchange. Her agitation grows more visible against his stillness. Where she leans forward, he remains composed. Where she rushes, he slows everything down. Viewers watching feel it too. This is the moment where most authority figures snap, where ego answers ego and control is asserted through force. Anticipation builds for the explosion that never arrives. Instead, the judge pauses longer than expected, allowing the weight of her own words to settle. Without opposition, they begin to sound different, less powerful, more exposed. The courtroom absorbs the contrast. Noise versus silence. Emotion versus discipline. The balance of power subtly shifts, not through confrontation, but through restraint. What once felt like confidence now reads as insecurity filling a void. The longer the calm holds, the more uncomfortable her posture becomes. Her certainty falters, not because she is challenged, but because she is not. Judge Caprio's stillness communicates something unmistakable. He is not overwhelmed. He is not threatened. He is in control precisely because he does not need to prove it. The room begins to align with him, drawn instinctively towards stability. Even those who moments ago were bracing for chaos now sense a different outcome approaching. Her final words trail off, landing without impact. The tension peaks in the quiet that follows. Every eye turns back to the bench. The air feels suspended, as if waiting for a signal. Then, without raising his voice, the judge finally spoke. Judge Caprio does not respond immediately. He looks at her, not with irritation, but with a steady attentiveness that feels almost disarming. When he finally speaks, his voice is low, even unhurried. He does not challenge her tone. He does not correct her attitude. Instead, he addresses the assumption beneath her words. The belief that power announces itself, that authority must shout to be real. He explains that the courtroom is not a battlefield, and justice is not a competition. power, he says, is not proven by how loudly someone speaks, but by how carefully they listen. Each sentence is deliberate, stripped of flourish, yet heavy with meaning. The quieter he becomes, the more the room leans in. What once felt like tension begins to transform into focus. He reminds her that rules exist not to punish, but to protect. That accountability is not an attack, but a responsibility shared by everyone who participates in a system meant to be fair. His eyes never leave hers, not in confrontation, but in expectation. He speaks as if assuming she is capable of understanding, capable of rising to the moment rather than shrinking from it. That assumption alone changes the tone of the exchange. There is a pause long enough to feel uncomfortable. In that pause, something shifts. The confidence she carried in begins to waver. Her posture stiffens, then softens. The certainty that once propelled her words forward starts to falter, replaced by hesitation. For the first time, she is not filling the silence. She is listening, processing, recalibrating. Judge Caprio continues, explaining that respect cannot be demanded through defiance. It is built through conduct, through choices made when emotions run high. He does not accuse her of disrespect, but he names the behavior calmly, allowing it to speak for itself. He makes clear that authority does not disappear when challenged. It reveals itself through restraint. The message lands precisely because it is not delivered as a reprimand. Another pause follows, intentional and measured. The courtroom feels suspended between breaths. Faces in the gallery shift from anticipation to recognition. This is not a lecture. It is a recalibration. He reframes the moment entirely, moving it away from conflict and toward consequence. The question is no longer who has power, but how it is used, and to what end. Her expression changes almost imperceptibly. The defiance drains from her eyes, replaced by confusion, then something closer to realization. The strategy she relied on has failed, not because it was overpowered, but because it was unnecessary. The louder she became, the less relevant her words sounded against his calm clarity. The imbalance becomes impossible to ignore. Judge Caprio speaks again, reminding her that the courtroom is one of the few places where everyone stands equal before the law. Not louder, not stronger, not more entitled, equal. His tone never hardens, but the weight of the idea settles heavily. In that equality, there is no room for performance. Only responsibility, accountability, and choice. He explains that being heard does not require domination, and being respected does not require intimidation. True authority, he says, creates space rather than occupying it. Each sentence lands with quiet force, not because it corners her, but because it invites her to see herself clearly within the moment. The room remains silent, absorbing every word. The power in the room shifts decisively. What began as a confrontation now feels like a lesson unfolding in real time. The judge has not raised his voice, yet control has moved entirely to his side of the bench. Her shoulders lower, her hands still. The energy that once fueled her interruptions dissipates, replaced by an unfamiliar stillness. In that stillness, the audience senses the full reversal. Moments earlier, she believed authority could be rattled, bent, exposed through challenge. Now she is confronted with a different truth. Authority does not chase validation. It does not compete. It waits confident in its foundation. The realization settles slowly, visibly, as if the room itself is teaching the lesson alongside the judge. For those watching, the exchange lands with unexpected force. There is relief in seeing composure prevail. Vindication in watching arrogance dissolve without cruelty. Awe in witnessing how restraint can command more respect than aggression ever could. The moment feels larger than the people involved, a reminder of how power is meant to function when guided by principle rather than ego. The courtroom seems to breathe out together. No one speaks. No one moves. The silence is shared, collective, and heavy with understanding. Something has been resolved without being argued into submission. Something has been corrected without punishment. The authority on display feels complete, not because it dominates, but because it endures. The lesson lingers quietly, unmistakably present. Observers sense they have witnessed something rare, a moment where restraint wins without spectacle, where dignity stands firm without force, where power proves itself not by crushing resistance, but by outlasting it. The exchange settles into memory, already destined to be replayed and shared. Even the judge's stillness communicates resolve. His posture unchanged signals that nothing more is required. The moment has concluded on its own terms, leaving clarity in its wake. No gavel strikes, no warning issued, yet the lesson stands firm, carried by restraint, clarity, and unwavering moral authority alone in that room. He finishes by making it clear that accountability does not diminish a person's worth. It affirms it. Being held to a standard means being taken seriously. His words offer a path forward without humiliation, without defeat. They invite reflection rather than resistance, responsibility rather than resentment. When he stops speaking, the silence returns, but it feels different now. It is no longer tense. It is settled. The courtroom absorbs the shift, aware that something decisive has occurred. The power has flipped, not through force, but through clarity. And though the exchange seems contained to these walls, its resonance is already moving outward. But the impact of his words didn't stop at the courtroom doors. The moment doesn't stay confined to the courtroom. Within hours, clips begin circulating online, clipped, replayed, reposted. A few seconds of silence, a few calm sentences, and suddenly timelines are filled with reactions. The comment sections light up first, then the shares multiply. People recognize what they've witnessed, even if they struggle to put it into words. Viewers from different backgrounds see themselves reflected in the exchange. Some remember teachers who commanded respect without shouting. Others think of parents who taught discipline through example, not fear. Immigrant families share the clip with captions about dignity, about fairness, about the kind of authority they hoped their children would encounter. The judge's calm becomes a symbol, reminder that systems can still work when guided by principle. Hashtags begin trending, not out of outrage, but admiration. Users praise the restraint, the composure, the refusal to humiliate. Many contrast it with what they see daily online, where arguments escalate instantly and ego replaces understanding. In a culture trained to expect explosions, the quietness feels almost revolutionary. Reaction videos follow. Some creators pause the clip mid-silence, pointing out how the lack of interruption does the work. Others replay the judge's words slowly, emphasizing how each sentence dismantles entitlement without cruelty. Commenters nod along, typing variations of the same sentiment. This is how authority should look. This is how respect is earned. This is what accountability feels like when it isn't weaponized. Older viewers reflect on how rare such moments have become. Younger viewers express surprise, even relief, at seeing power exercised without intimidation. Teachers mention using the clip in classrooms. Parents talk about showing it to their children. The exchange becomes a teaching tool, a shared reference point for conversations about responsibility, tone, self-control. Criticism of entitlement culture grows sharper by contrast. Viewers point out how quickly confidence collapses when it isn't grounded in substance. They discuss how silence can expose insecurity more effectively than confrontation. The girl's outburst becomes less the focus than the response it provoked. Her volume fades from memory, while the judge's calm lingers. Across platforms, the same idea repeats itself. The loudest person in the room is not always the most powerful. The strongest response is not always the most forceful. People feel validated seeing that belief affirmed publicly, without theatrics. The ripple spreads precisely because it feels earned. It's not staged. The clip is replayed in living rooms, shared in group chats, forwarded with simple messages. Watch this. This matters. Each share adds another layer of meaning, another audience who finds something familiar in the exchange. The courtroom becomes a backdrop for a broader conversation about how society handles conflict, authority, and restraint. What makes the moment resonate is not the absence of consequence, but the presence of clarity. The judge didn't overpower anyone. He didn't need to. His response offered something rarer than punishment. It offered understanding, paired with expectation, and that combination travels far. As the reactions continue to build, the story shifts from confrontation to reflection. People aren't just watching what happened. They're considering how they respond when challenged, how they speak when emotions rise, and what kind of authority they respect. In the end, the judge offered something no punishment ever could. Judge Caprio doesn't simply close the case. He reframes it, transforming what could have been a fleeting confrontation into a lesson that extends far beyond the courtroom walls. He speaks not to punish, but to illuminate. Every word carries a reminder. True power is not measured in volume or intimidation. It is measured in restraint, in patience, in the courage to act with fairness even when provoked. He explains that respect cannot be demanded. It must be earned. Authority does not come from asserting dominance, but from demonstrating integrity. Every choice, every calm response, every careful word reinforces the principle that leadership rooted in humility and understanding carries far more weight than force ever could. Those listening feel the clarity sink in. The lesson is not abstract, it is visible in the shift of energy. In the way tension dissolves, the realization that dignity can coexist with accountability. The judge frames the moment as universal. It is not just about this young woman, this citation, or this courtroom. It is about how society functions when people understand responsibility, honor rules, and treat one another with decency. He reminds everyone that fairness is not selective, that compassion does not excuse negligence, and that true justice uplifts rather than humiliates. The exchange becomes a mirror, reflecting not just behavior in that moment, but choices we all face in daily life. For viewers, the message resonates deeply. Immigrant families, progressive thinkers, anyone who has ever struggled against systems that seemed indifferent to their effort. This is validation. Authority can be firm without cruelty. Rules can be enforced without humiliation. Accountability can coexist with empathy. The courtroom becomes a stage for moral clarity, a place where the right choice is visible and achievable, even under pressure. By the end, the confrontation has transformed into inspiration. The girl's defiance is eclipsed by the demonstration of composure. What might have been remembered as a moment of chaos becomes a story of principle, and as viewers reflect, they carry with them a simple but powerful truth. Power is quiet, respect is earned, and dignity once upheld creates ripples that extend far beyond any single encounter. You're powerless. Those words echoed through the courtroom, meant to intimidate, to unsettle, to claim authority where none existed. But in the silence that followed, their weight collapsed under the truth of the moment. Power was not in the shout. Power was in the calm. Power was in the steady. It's the unwavering principle that no amount of noise could overturn. The lesson is clear. The loudest voice in the room is rarely the strongest. Authority is not performed through defiance or spectacle. Respect is not demanded through intimidation. True strength comes from consistency, patience, moral clarity, the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you act with fairness and dignity, no matter the challenge. When the room went silent, the lesson spoke louder than any argument ever could. This story is bigger than one courtroom, one citation, or one confrontation. It is a reflection of how society functions when principle guides action, when integrity outweighs ego, and when accountability is paired with compassion. It reminds us that dignity is more powerful than arrogance, that restraint is stronger than rage, that fairness is always more persuasive than force. Share this story. Let it reach others who need to see that calm authority can transform a moment. Stand for dignity over ego. Support accountability, not chaos. Show that strength is not in loudness, but in the courage to uphold values quietly, firmly, without faltering. A courtroom stayed calmed, and that calm power spoke loudest.